Hello everyone, my name is Joanna Munoz and my presentation for today would be about Chapter 14, Students at Work in the Studio Habits of Mind from the textbook Studio Thinking 2. Okay, so this is the table of content, what we're going to go over throughout the slides. So the first one we're going to go over is the Students at Work sessions, Studio Habits of Mind. And then the second is example one, introducing throwing centering on the wheel projects by Jason Green. And then for the two students developing crafts breakdown, students at work studio habits of mind. And then example two, connecting worlds, secret ritual vessels project. These are examples that they show in the textbook and what Beth students at work in the studio habits of mind, what Beth does in her ideas of how to work with the studio habits of mind, and then individualizing during students at work sessions. And then this concludes another area where they're going to break down other examples as well from individualizing during students at work sessions. First example, differentiating for students of various abilities, experience levels, abstraction project. That's another example of what I explained. And then they're gonna show these two examples of beginner students struggling and then beginner student confidence. And then the second example is individualizing from multiple agendas, creating hat and vest projects. And and then after the whole PowerPoint, there's going to be an exit ticket at the end. Students at work sessions, according to the book, teacher always emphasize all studio habits in mind when students are at work because students at work sessions always involve in working with art materials and develop crafts. Technique is the central goal. It's rarely taught in isolation. Basically, these individuals, students, have like consults with student teachers often cluster instructions about a number of studio habits of mind that help students understand the connection among habits and how to integrate them into their working process. Um, Another thing, teachers often cluster instructions about a number of studio habits of mind that help students understand the connection among habits and how to put it in their work. It occurs together frequently in single student teachers interactions. Um, and for instance, they develop craft techniques, was often layered with observe, envision, and reflect questions and explain and evaluate. On the long run, I'll show you the examples of how teachers implement these techniques that way whenever you're with the student individually on the other slides. So this is an example one, introducing throwing centering on the wheel project. This is one of the examples in the textbook that Jason Green was doing with the students. So Jason Green was doing a vase project that introduced in mid-October for a ceramics course for 9th and 12th graders at Walnut Hill. So he was collaborating with two students in how he lectures a small technical issue of trimming a pot can, which it could be an instrument for the students to develop temperament to ponder with a broad span of studio habits of mind. So he had two students, one was advanced and one beginner, in which they were having practical problems with trimming. Um, what Jason did, he asked questions that aid to verbalize their practical problems and observe in their work process, which led to their issues. Especially patiently teaching techniques, and observes, guided their hands to try techniques. He also gave them ideas from other successful finished art pieces to solve their problem and encourage them when discouraged. Um, for the beginner student, what he would do is that the beginner student, well, for the beginner student, they wanted to destroy. her pieces that she has built. But meanwhile, Jason kind of encouraged her not to be quick on her assignments and to stretch and explore in her vision of the opportunities. In other words, he didn't want her to kind of destroy what she had. Instead, she can use those opportunities or those mistakes to see or linger what she can make out of those. Instead of starting herself over again with the art pieces. Um, and then for the middle ground, for both for beginner and for advanced students, Jason would aid these students to engage and persist. So he would encourage them, as always, through their works. They are having problems, encouraging to keep trying and reassure them that they will succeed. So he was motivating them instead of, even though some students would be discouraged on what they would work, and instead he would motivate them to continue what they have and see what they can do with it. Um, and for advanced students, when an advanced student feels frustrated with the lack of the solution, um, Jason would encourage her and says she just needs to practice and demonstrate the exact skills required and point out the many strengths in praising her progress so far to engage and persist. So for when it comes to an advanced students, try to like think of what they have, how far they have gone into their projects, what they could do so far, and praising them in a way where she has the ability to do so. Just she shouldn't just lack of the solutions of that. So instead, he kind of in a way would tell her that she can do other things and do other like ideas of projects that could continue with her improvement. Like what we had explained about the two students, one who was a beginner and one advanced. These are the other examples or the other ways that he would do for the two students developing craft. He encouraged his students to look closely at their work and his indication. So this is a way where he would observe them to see where they're at. And then the next step, he would consider their progress, which he would reflect and question and explain, even evaluate with them, asking them where they're going at or what is the process of the work, what is behind it, excuse me, what's the message of it. Um, and then the next, he would imagine new possibilities. He would also aid them in envisioning things or help them envision other ideas where they could do where they nothing can be impossible of. And in the next step, he would move beyond their current capabilities. In other words, he would stretch and explore. You could say he would broaden their horizon instead of thinking of the small box. They can think outside of the box. Then the next step, he would stick with it through difficulties, persist and engage. So when students still have that lack of not wanting to, or they could not picture it or see it, he would be there and be their guidance and encourage them to keep trying and to keep pursuing or keep going and not give up on what they have halfway done. Okay, so this is another example in the textbook as well, which it's Connecting Worlds, where Beth Ballerow's assignment was Secret Ritual Vessels Project. And this was her second semester course for ninth graders and at the Boston Academy, collaborated with students focusing on another studio habits of mind. She wanted to build connections between students' art making and their daily lives, so she created a homework assignment and asked her students that they will be spying on how people they know use many crafts in their daily lives. Beth wanted to inspire her students to be interested in the world that surrounds them and link into their education of art. So even according to the book itself, for what I have seen here, she wants her students to find links between their works and those of recognized artists as well. Um, Especially, Beth also wants her students to be able to articulate the thought behind their work, the process they went through in creating the work, the decisions they made, and the relationships of the work to value of subcultures that they understand, which basically is reflect, questions, and explain and evaluate. So on the bottom below are the steps that she has done. So the first one is each of her students were assigned a type craft to create secretly. It could be an heirloom, uh, something to hold holy water, or a cat's water bowl. And the focus for the secret assignment is to aid students to link with the project, which is to engage and persist. Then they would think about the purpose of the project, which they would reflect, question, and explain and evaluate. Um, and then they would create symbolic forms that the assigned uh, purpose suggested, which is envision and express. And then the next slide, there's going to be continuations of what she did, other ideas as well. So I will show you. So this is the continuation of Bad Students at Work and the Study Habits of Mind. So on the chapter, it would say, in this class, the students at work session is followed by critique, where students look at each other's vessels set out on the tables for display. They will write their observations about each vessel and guess the type of secret assignment for one vessel. So the first thing that she would do is that she would give rise to their assigned secret vessels to serve to get them fascinated and bring attention, which is engage and persist. And then she would also find ways to adapt the students' own ideas to their assigned structure, which she would express. Then early on, Beth would ask her students on their ideas, which she would express as well. And then on how to think about their assigned structure by imagining and planning possibilities, envisioning. And then how to connect it to the idea of ritual, which it was express, stretch, and explore, understand art world communities, because Beth was doing a community during the time when the students were doing their projects. So students going further into the project, she would, as when the students developed the structure, Beth would work with them to ponder about what they are making. So she would reflect, questions, and explain. Then she challenged the students to think what their craft will bring a message to others, or which would be expressed. Then lastly, the project challenges students to go further beyond their usual concept of crafting and their uses, stretch and explore, understand our world's domain. So the whole purpose of her project that she did, or the assignments that she would do for the students, is that she wanted to go beyond for the students, or want her students to go beyond what they are capable of, and which that was very interesting that she did for her students, that I never expect that. And so it was very fascinating. So this is going to be different compared to the previous slides that we have talked about. This is going to be more about individualizing during students at work sessions. So teachers are going to be with students on their own, and they're going to use, or how do they manage them with using the studios of habits of mind. So this is the first example for what we're going to be discussing. So the first example is differentiating for students of various abilities, experience levels, abstractions, projects. So this is James Woodside's second semester of multi-age drawing class at Walnut Hill. So he had a variety of different levels of students. So what Jim did was Jim creates assignments that engaged a wide range of abilities and experiences of his students, and then adjusts his instructions to individual needs during the students at work sessions. Um, so Jim works with two beginning students, one who is struggling with the assignment and the other who has more confidence, excitement, and skills. Beginner student struggling. Jim interacts with a ninth grader who is new to the school and has limited English skills. It might have been a student who might have been foreigner or did not understand English really well or had struggles with his English. So he noticed the student would be confused and not understand the assignment. So Jim takes the student aside and shows some student examples of previous student works. He would ask the student to observe the many works of sketches and look at the different drawings and how each are not the same. The student noticed the differences and start to develop an idea. So in a mini critique, Jim not only supports the beginning student in overcoming his initial obstacles with the assignment, engage and persist, but also help him refine his observational habits, which was observe. Um, Jim encourages the students to move beyond his current abilities and try new ways of seeing the still life, stretch and explore. So after he had showed him ways to go beyond, later on he encouraged the student to use a viewfinder. So after whenever Jim came back to check on the student, he noticed the student would struggle on using the viewfinder and would see the small details or the small picture. Instead, he wanted the student to look up something more bigger, more larger than that for the viewfinder. So what Jim would do, he would encourage the student to develop new habits of looking by drawing on his sketch and then referring to the still life. Jim showed the student how to see the large shapes and learn to improve his own technical drawing skills, which would be observe, reflect, develop craft techniques. Continuing forward, the class was already halfway through. Jim encourages the students to go even further in pushing the lights and dark by using a kneaded eraser on his drawing, which is a new technique. So he would stretch and explore with them. Then Jim demonstrates the process right on the drawing and makes a white surface and dark black shading to make the form on the page, which this was developed craft technique and observe. After the last minute of class, Jim would compliment and praise the student's work, engage and persist, and then we'll give him some final bits of technical advice, showing how to use white charcoal to make his contrast even stronger, develop craft technique, stretch, and explore. Now we're going to the beginner student confident. The next student that Jim works with starts off excitedly with a clear plan of what he wants to do. His first study, he darkened his whole page and is using an eraser to depict where the light falls on the paper. Jim supports his idea but also encourages him to explore more of the central ideas of the abstraction. So what he would do is that he showed him how he can develop a system for thinking about which line should be dark and which should be light. So he would give him an idea of what it would look or imagined, which that was envisioned to the student. Then Jim also explained the core idea of abstraction to the student, and he stated that way there's a purpose for what you're doing. It's not just decorating your drawings, and that logic is really important, especially in an abstract drawing. It gives you a sense of purpose in relationship to what you're doing. So this was a stretch and explore, understand art world's domain. So he will tell the student the term of what abstraction was about. He will tell him that it's not just a doodle. He wants the student to understand that what abstraction really means. Second example, individualizing for multiple agendas, creating hats and best projects. So Kathleen Marsh taught this near the beginning of her second semester class with seniors at the Boston Art Academy. She is one of the teachers multitasking to keep students on track with the assignments at hand and to help individual students with their outside work. So since the students are putting together their final portfolios according to the chapter, she reminds them of this by introducing a several-week self-portrait assignment that will result in a finished value drawing that can be a showcase piece in their portfolios. So in the class, students create wearable paper hats and vests from oak tags that express something about their identity. In later sessions, They will make charcoal value drawings of themselves wearing the paper clothing. Today's portion of the assignment challenges students to both envision and express something about themselves, as they must imagine what the hats and vests they make now will convey about themselves and how they will look as they wear them for their value drawings. So the first thing that Kathleen did is that in a single working session, Kathleen is able to keep the class as a whole engaged in working, engage and persist. Then the next step, connecting with individual students on issues central to their development as artists, such as preparations of their portfolios, reflect, evaluate, develop craft studios, practice and techniques. Since they were seniors, she was trying to prepare their portfolios, like how we just discussed or we just talked about in the chapter, that she was preparing their portfolios once they graduate and or when they could use those assignments or um, pieces when they graduate or when they're going to a college or when they're going to an art school. And the next step is in progress is applying to college and or art schools, understand art world's communities, just like how we just said. She wanted her students, since they were seniors, she wanted her students to be prepared for the real world. Now the whole point of the PowerPoint or the presentation of chapter 14 is that this chapter has illustrated how teachers use students at work sessions to keep their art making goals at the center of the learning process while personalizing instructions to suit a range of student needs. And that concludes my presentation. I also have an exit ticket, and here is also the QR code, chapter 14, students at work and the studio habits of mind exit ticket. It's only a 3 questions, and I also have a Google form link will be provided to answer as well. Thank you for listening and hearing my presentation, and hopefully you have a wonderful day.